As Republican lawmakers continue to call on the Biden administration to offer more public support for dissidents in Cuba, leftists across the U.S., including most notably Black Lives Matter, are actually blaming the United States for the abject misery in that communist country. The organization ripped a page straight out of the regime's handbook, posting a message on Instagram that read, "Black Lives Matter condemns the U.S. federal government's inhumane treatment of Cubans and urges it to immediately lift the economic embargo. This cruel and inhumane policy, instituted with the explicit intention of destabilizing the country and undermining Cubans' right to choose their own government, is at the heart of Cuba's current crisis." No, I don't think that's true. Here's what one Cuban dissident recently had to say. Did you see the word embargo in any of what he had to say? Listen.
No aguantamos más, ya no más. Queremos libertad, libertad para nuestro país. Que nuestro país tenga pensamiento libre y no estar oprimido, preso, allá en esa isla cárcel, porque así se llama, isla cárcel. Necesitamos libertad. ¡Viva Cuba!
You see what she said there? Nothing about embargo. With us to discuss this today, President and CEO of the Common Sense Society, Marion Smith. Marion, thanks for being with us.
Great to be with you, Buck.
Strong piece on FoxNews.com you wrote about this. Why do you think Black Lives Matter and other leftists in the U.S. are so hesitant to criticize the communist government of Cuba?
Well, I think it's a clarifying moment. We see the true colors of BLM shining through here, where it's very clear that their commitment to the Marxist cause in the United States, tearing down the institutions that they believe are standing in the way of racial justice here, very much prevents them from understanding the reality of what is happening in Cuba today, where black and brown people are suffering along with all ethnic Cubans on the island. And it has nothing to do with unfulfilled Marxist dreams. It has to do with the fact that since 1959, Marxism has delivered in Cuba the way it has in every other country, some 40 countries where it's been tried. The Castros came to power vilifying the United States. They have blamed the embargo for the suffering of the Cuban people. But in reality, the United States has been the greatest provider of humanitarian aid to the island of Cuba, more than any other country. And it has been the government of Cuba, the communist regime, that has had an embargo on its own people, preventing Cubans, for example, from fishing in lakes on the island or from fishing on the beaches to feed themselves. That's illegal. Most of the fish is gathered by state fisheries and sold abroad. Even foodstuffs that are delivered to Cuba through trade, the prices are marked up by the Cuban government and sold to the Cuban people. And the Cuban people realize it. And we're seeing protests on the island unprecedented since the Cuban Revolution of 1959. And that's because the stories of the suffering, those who have been killed, researchers know the names of some 11,000 people who have been killed by the Cuban regime, and the true number of casualties is far greater. But it's a time for reckoning and justice, and the current situation is the result of communism in Cuba. It has not been caused by the United States government.
Senator Marco Rubio fired back at Black Lives Matter after that Instagram post when he tweeted, "The extortionist ring known as Black Lives Matter organization took a break today from shaking down corporations for millions and buying themselves mansions to share their support for the communist regime in Cuba." Marion, it seems like at least Marco Rubio doesn't plan on letting BLM off easy for that statement. Are they losing ground, you think, in the court of public opinion, such as it is?
Well, again, I think it's a clarifying moment where the true colors are shining through. The origins of BLM, the organization, certainly are grounded in Marxism. You have the founders spouting Marxist talking points. You have one of the founders appearing on stage with the dictator Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, very much a part of the international socialist movement, which are apologists for the dictatorship in Venezuela, for the dictatorship in Cuba, and in support of the violent Marxist groups throughout Latin America that are destabilizing otherwise peaceful democratic populations. who very much want what the people of Cuba are saying they want by the thousands on the streets: libertad.
Now, what do you think about the Biden administration's response to all this at this phase? I mean, clearly BLM has a stated sympathy for the communist regime in Cuba, but the Democrats who are in charge, some would say, aren't a whole lot better. What do you make of it?
Well, I think there was once a moment in this country where opposition to communism, defense of liberty, individual rights, human rights, free enterprise was a bipartisan issue. Harry Truman, JFK, Ronald Reagan, great anti-communist presidents, 2 Democrats and a Republican, I think would find it very perplexing what is happening today in American politics. It's very clear that within one party there is a radical left-wing faction that is vying for control of one of the 2 major political parties in this country. And of course, that loud, organized, vocal, extremist group within the Democratic Party is trying to pressure them to not take action in this moment related to Cuba. And I would just call on the Biden administration to understand that with very little effort and with very little political capital expended, we can change the situation on the ground in Cuba. And that would be by voicing support for the Cuban protesters and their goals. It would be by providing internet on the island, simply so that the world could see what is happening. They are disappearing activists and suspected protesters right now. They're kidnapping the children of suspected protesters to intimidate them and silence them. Protesters are being shot. There are reports of protesters being killed on the spot. So what is happening is unprecedented. The United States, with very little expenditure of political capital, could make a huge difference. It is not necessarily our legal duty to do so, but we do have the opportunity as free people to speak up when they are silenced.
Do you think this could be the end of the communist regime?
Well, I think it is a turning point, potentially. What you saw in Venezuela with the death of Hugo Chavez was the dictatorship lived on in the dictatorship, the person of Nicolas Maduro. Fidel Castro is dead. Raul Castro has taken a step back. And so we're now seeing whether or not another generation of Cuban communists is going to be able to keep the dictatorship going. And I think what you're seeing clearly on the streets, despite the intimidation and the fear, is that the Cuban people have had enough. They would not like to see this experiment in socialism continue on the island. They want to take control of their destiny. They want freedom.
Marion, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Buck.